Strengthening the Ties Between Prisoners and Their Families, a consultation on behalf of Lincolnshire Action Trust by Angela Harwood and Eloise Quayla.
This presentation will be on the study Strengthening the Ties Between Prisoners and Their Families, a consultation on behalf of Lincolnshire Action Trust, which myself and Eloise created together. So, the topic of our research is about assessing the importance of family ties for people in prison. We chose this topic because it's quite important to study family ties for people in prison, because evidence has shown that once people enter the prison system, their ties to their family and friends become to some extent broken. And so there's a great importance for reintroducing these family ties and maintaining them. So we completed this study alongside Lincolnshire Action Trust, or LAT. Lincolnshire Action Trust are a charity within Lincolnshire who work alongside prisons within Lincolnshire to approve the services which people in prison and their families have. So there's some relevant research within this topic area that we looked at before doing our research. The first one is by Homer in 1997, and he found that maintaining contact with family whilst in prison is an important method for preserving family ties. Brodsky in 1975 found that evidence shows that maintaining marriages and relationships on the same level whilst in prison was difficult. Braunch in 1985 found that maintaining contact can be difficult, especially for families, as factors outside of their control can prevent visitation, such as distance of prison from hometown. Richards, 1978, found that the preservation of communication with people outside of prison is an important element of helping manage the mental health of people in prison serving long-term sentences. So some of these findings are things that we also found within our study and will be discussed later on.
The aim of the research was to raise awareness of the importance of family ties to both people in prison as well as relatives on the outside. We also had to report to LAT, which is short for Lincolnshire Action Trust, the findings from 3 prisons, which were Lincoln, Humberside and Stockton. This was to help them overcome any issues that are flagged up from the surveys.
Research methodology. So the method that we used for this piece of research was a questionnaire. We sent out a survey through Lincolnshire Action Trust to a handful of different prisons within Lincolnshire. The questions consisted of both qualitative and quantitative questions. The participant sample size that we had was 121 participants. 81 of those participants were people in prison in Lincolnshire, and all of them were male. 40 of them were family members or friends of people in prison. 31 were female, 3 were male, and 6 were unknown. The sample size was smaller than we had hoped because some of the prisons which we sent the survey out to were not able to collect a large enough sample, so we weren't able to use the data that we received from them. The survey was created with both open and closed-ended questions. We chose to make the survey on Word rather than a program such as Qualtrics. This is because the surveys needed to be printed out and handed to people in prison and their families. Because of technical and logistical issues, people in prison wouldn't have access to the internet and be able to answer the survey online. So this is the approach that we had to take.
The graph in the slide shows that family visit prisoners more than friends. You can see that before entering prison, people in prison were visited by both family and friends, but then during prison there was a significant decline in friends visiting people in prison. It was also found that 37.5% of respondents in our family and friends survey stated they were visiting a spouse/partner. This is in comparison to 5% visiting a friend. A common theme amongst people in prison contacting family and friends is that they are limited on how many contacts they have and how many people they can see a month. This was noticed in several answers within the surveys. 49.4% of people in prison were not aware of LAT and the support they provide to help maintain family ties. However, around 10 participants in the family and friends survey expressed how helpful the support LAT gives to them is. The COVID-19 pandemic also affected people in prison. Around 71.7% of people in prison arrived during the COVID-19 pandemic, but 38.3% of people in prison had not had visitors during their time during the pandemic. When asked how the COVID-19 pandemic affected visits for them, a common theme was found that among 23 people in prison, the lack of physical and verbal contact had a negative impact on their mental health. This was also found in the family and friends survey, as 13 participants expressed how hard it was not to engage in physical contact with the person they were visiting. Furthermore, 5 respondents highlighted the negative impact it had on children of prisoners, as they have no contact with their parent for a long period of time. There were several limitations of the research. One issue with this study was that the sample size was 121 people. 81 people were in prison and 40 family members. This is not enough to draw representations from. A larger sample would allow a wider generalization to take place and give more of an insight into the importance of family ties. Furthermore, there were significantly more participants from the people in prison condition compared to the family, meaning an equal perspective may not have been gained. Another limitation was that there was no female representation within the prison sample. This further results in no generalizations being able to be made about both females and males within prison. As one of the limitations was that we only looked at males, future research should take into consideration gender. A current study carried out by Quayla in 1983 found that 50% of fathers within prison never saw their children. Unlike the mothers, mothers may have a stronger bond to their children, thus making it important to raise awareness of this and strengthen the tie. It is very important to look at both males and females because clearly the results produce different answers.
After completing our research, we decided that it's also important to look at more recent research that's been conducted within this area, as within the introduction, the research which we were looking at was created mostly within the 70s and 80s, so it could be considered a little bit outdated. So we wanted to see if research from this century showed different results outside of just our own research. So the piece of research which we looked at was Dixon and Woodhull in 2009, and they found issues within transport links, transport and visitation costs, and length and style of visitations. So I'll go in a bit more depth about that. So they found that travelling to prison takes up too much time for visitors due to there being insufficient public transport links. This is especially difficult for people who want to visit prison if they're bringing young children as well. And this can mean that the journey to visit someone in prison just takes far too long. The travelling and visitation costs can become too expensive for a lot of people who want to visit prison as well. And many of these people visiting their family members in prison are also providing money for their family members once they arrive there too. So the overall cost to visit for a lot of people is just not affordable. They also found that the length of visitations were too short, with many people who are visiting spending more time travelling to get to the prison than they actually spent at the prison with the person that they were seeing. They also found that the restrictive nature of visitation rules made visits which were meant to be open visits feel like closed visits. This is something that they wanted to see change, so that visitations can feel more intimate and feel more like a comfortable experience. And then the last point was that many families were unaware of the financial support schemes, or they're not eligible for them. This is something which we found in our piece of research as well, as LAT can provide financial support schemes, but many people aren't aware of the support that LAT provide.
The main conclusion to be drawn from this study is that family ties are important. Furthermore, that the work LAT does is crucial to strengthening ties. However, not many people in prison have heard about their work. The COVID-19 pandemic has definitely had a massive impact on people in prisons, mental health, and being able to stay in contact with family and friends. There is also a massive impact on children not being able to see their fathers. All of these issues have been raised to LAT and hopefully will be overcome or managed.
So some recommendations which we have made based off of the results of our survey is that people in prison and their family members would really benefit with access to more frequent phone calls. They would also like if people in prison wouldn't have to prioritise contacting family over friends, which was a common issue that occurred. So if they were able to have more phone calls per week or per month, this wouldn't necessarily force them to have to prioritise one group over another. Something that was mentioned several times was in-cell telephones. This is something which other prisons have introduced, and it's been really, really well received and beneficial. So if Lincolnshire prisons could introduce in-cell telephones, it would be very beneficial to people in prison who want to contact their family and friends. Another recommendation is to reintroduce the online booking system for ease of access. So it seems that there used to be an online booking system which family or friends could use if they wanted to come and make a visit. However, that system has now been removed. So instead, if someone wants to visit a family member or a friend at prison, they need to call up. And there was many issues with that due to only one person being able to be on the phone line at a time. This links to the next recommendation, which is to introduce a queuing system on phone lines. So if there was a queuing system, more people would be able to be on the line and contact the prison so that they can book a visitation. Otherwise, they need to just keep calling back in the hopes that eventually they get through when the line is free. And then the last recommendation is longer time in purple rooms. This is a recurring thing that came up, and it would allow fathers in prison to be able to spend more quality time with their children.